Here we are for another round of the 70s versus the 90s, and we continue with Black History Month. And we take a couple of musical biopics and put them up against each other. When I put Sidney J. Furie's Lady Sings the Blues against Brian Gibson's What's Love Got to Do with It. Now, with this one, both these movies are biopics, so there's no point in going into the plot and what it's really about. You know what it's about. So it's more or less we're going to look at what movie is better, like who did what better, who was the better actors, who did the better sing. So there's a lot of factors in this one. It really ain't, like I said, when it comes to biopics, there's not much to talk about. So it's usually like how good they're done and how entertaining they are. So first up, we have Sidney J. Furie's Lady Sings the Blues, starring Diana Ross as the great Billie Holiday. And Diana Ross, of course, magnificent singer herself, came up through the Supremes and went solo, and just was an explosion of musical talent, and really an inspired casting choice for Billie Holiday, because they kind of have similar looks, and and of course Diana Ross being the singer, she does her own singing, and she is able to capture like that haunting sound that Billie Holiday had. And the film itself, it's definitely kind of an epic film that deals with her struggle with heroin addiction, and of course, troubled relationships. Billy D. Williams plays Louis McKay, who's also the love interest in the film. And, and of course, Richard Pryor's also in this as the piano man, in a way, is a good friend of hers, kind of an enabler in a way. But, his role is really fun in the film. And of course, the music is fucking great too. I mean, it's got of course, Diana Ross is doing the singing, she's singing all these Billie Holiday songs, and the music is used very well to capture what's going on in the film. Because of course, then on top of dealing with drug addiction, she's also dealing with racism and shit. Coming up at a very at a time where black singers weren't really respected the way they should have been and stuff. And so, of course, Sidney J. Furie is a director. He's just a journeyman director, and he does a good job with this film. It touches all the bases and stuff. But then when we look at Brian Gibson's What Love Got to Do with It, about where it's Angela Bassett playing the great Tina Turner, it's a different thing, because you're looking at, one thing you got to look at is when you have a singer playing a singer, and then you have an actor playing a singer. Now, where like Diana Ross did all of her own singing for Billie Holiday's songs, Angela Bassett lip synced to Tina Turner's music. Now the thing about that is, because maybe it's a whole different thing of capturing the cadence of the way somebody talks. It's a little harder to capture the way somebody sings, especially somebody that has a unique voice like Tina Turner. Kind of a very smoky, masculine voice. But Angela Bassett does capture the cadence of Tina Turner, and the mannerisms and everything. You see her on stage, it's a pantomime that's so good that you think that it's real, because of course Angela Bassett, one of the greatest actors of all time. I mean, she's a fucking powerhouse actor, and of course this film is no exception. This is like one of her best performances. She becomes Tina Turner. Whether or not she did her own singing is irrelevant at this point. Honestly, that's really the only thing that I think Lady Sings the Blues has on What's Love Got to Do with, is the fact that Diana Ross did her own singing. But of course, she's Diana Ross. There's no way she's going to be lip syncing and shit. But also, though, too, like all of the acting in What's Love Got to Do with It is better than Lady Sings the Blues, because Lawrence Fishburne plays Ike Turner, who, he absolutely crushes that role, because I mean, of course, Lawrence Fishburne too is one of the greatest actors of all time. When he's in a role that he can just run with, where he doesn't have to like lecture the audience or tell the audience how to feel, he really shines. And in this one, like, he's playing one of the biggest assholes of all time, that beats the shit out of Tina Turner. And the film is like very inspiring. It's one of those movies that by the end of the film, you're in the seats cheering, because it's a woman's journey to her freedom, basically. She starts out from nothing, ends up getting in with Ike Turner and becoming Tina Turner, and then having to deal with his bullshit, getting the shit beat out of her for no fucking reason, and and then just taking control of her life. All she wants is her name, and she takes that name and does shit that that Ike could never dream of, because he's one of them motherfuckers that couldn't get out of his own way. Probably a great musician, but, you know, a fucking asshole that thought he was better than he was and couldn't just do it for the music. You know, everybody wants to be in a certain station and shit, and the film deals with that perfectly. Like I said, it's intense, and the thing about it is that the beauty of What's Love Got to Do with It is it doesn't, you know, kind of exploit these elements, because there are tendencies in especially in musical biopics where they want to really like stress the drama. You know, it's like, you know, there's only so many times you can see somebody get the shit beat out of them before you can get the point. You know, once, and you know, it's just done in a way that's a little more subtle than most musical biopics. So I got to give this round to What's Love Got to Do with It, because one, it's just a better movie. You know, it's not. I feel like Lady Sings the Blues may run about 30 minutes too long. You know, there's a lot of moments in it. You know, like Diana Ross is really good in the film. She might be the best one in the film as far as like one actually giving a performance. But, you know, there's a lot of times where it's just, you know, writhing in misery and stuff. And, you know, you get the point. Like I said, there's only so much shit you can show. You keep showing it, and like people can kind of get the point of the struggle, you know. Whereas What's Love Got to Do with It, you know, you're just cheering at the end because, you know, this whole journey, you know, and it's not necessarily something where one's more tragic than the other, you know. Both of these women went through their fair amount of shit, and, you know, both performances are great. But like I said, Diana Ross may be a better singer, but she ain't half the actor that Angela Bassett is. Like, Angela Bassett is, like I said, a fucking powerhouse. And, of course, like I said, Billy D. Williams is not the actor that Lawrence Fishburne is either. He's good at looking cool, but he really is not that great of an actor. And, of course, if we're going by directors, the directors are pretty even, too. You know, they're both journeymen doing a job. But, like I said, What's Love Got to Do with It is like almost a movie you could watch over and over again. You know, Lady Sings the Blues ain't necessarily something you want to watch more than one time. You've seen it once, you know, you don't need to see it again. But like, you know, with What's Love Got to Do with It, it's not really a fun watch, but it's an entertaining watch. It's a way better movie. So for anybody keeping score, that is 77 to 64. 70s are only up by 13 now. You know, they had broke that streak that the 90s were on, but now it looks like the 90s could be on a whole other streak. So stay tuned for that. You know, the month move on. You know, Black History Month may be over now, but we're going to continue with another main event next Saturday. Sweet Sweetback's Badass Song versus Do the Right Thing. So that one should be really intense. And like I said, if I've said anything wrong, anything you disagree with, feel free to eviscerate me in the comments. I mean, this is one asshole's opinion. You know, that I'm on a long self-indulgent journey to see which decade is better for movies, the 70s or the 90s. And, you know, the 70s are up by 13 still, but like I said, the 90s come back with them 1-2 punches, and they're not to be trifled with. But the 70s is probably the greatest decade of all time. That's why they're still up by 13. So it's going to get exciting, you know. Like I said, when it comes to Angela Bassett, you can't fucking beat her, man. She's one of the fucking greatest actors of all time, and she basically became Tina Turner, whether or not she did her own singing. So shout out to the lovely Angela Bassett, one of the greatest of all time. Still doesn't have an Oscar, if you can fucking believe that. One of the biggest travesties. So stick that in your pipe and smoke it. Let's get Angela Bassett an Oscar.